It is the 4th day of November 2014. I'm KAMENE GORO, and many thanks for joining us on Just the Facts, where the brilliant minds meet. Now today I'm not going to get into it and give you the lengthy introduction that I usually do, but tonight in studio with us we have an extremely remarkable man. A man that we are all familiar with and has been the pinnacle of leadership in this country for years on end. He was the former Prime Minister of the Grand Coalition government. He is currently the opposition leaders, and it goes without saying he is one of the revolutionary and most influential men in Kenya right now. In a studio with me, I have Honorable RAILA ODINGA to discuss various pertinent issues that he has quite a say in Kenya. Welcome so much, Mheshimiwa.
Thank you very much, Kamene. I'm happy to be here.
It's absolutely great to meet you in person. Very easy to relate to. Anyway, because I realize you don't have much time. You've been up and down the country, in and out of the country a lot, doing quite a bit. So just bring us up to speed with some of the things that you've been doing. I know that you recently came back from Mozambique. I was there at the press conference when you addressed the press on the various things that you were doing there. So just give us a small, outline of what it is that you did there and some of the lessons that you have brought back home.
Well, Mozambique has just gone through a national election.
Yes.
It was actually the 5th multi-party elections. The first one was held in 1994 when the civil war ended in that country. And they introduced a new constitution. So this time around I was invited by the AISA, that is the Electoral Institute for Sustainable Democracy in Africa, and together with the Carter Center to lead a joint mission to observe the elections in Mozambique. And as you know that there had been again a civil war going on.
Yeah.
They signed a peace accord on the 4th of September for the elections which were held on the 15th of October. So I led this team. There were 80 observers, but there were also other observer teams like the Commonwealth, the European Union, the African Union, the community of the Portuguese-speaking nations,
yes,
and so on there. So we were able to look at the electoral infrastructure in Mozambique and contrast it with what we have here in this country.
And what were some of the things you were able to draw from that? Where is Kenya? Are we in a good position? Do we still have a lot of things that we need to do?
I think that we really could learn a lot from a country like Mozambique, which of course has also learned the hard way, and they actually negotiated very hard to improve on their electoral laws. Like you see, they start from the premise that nobody in a country is neutral. That this whole idea of independent and neutral electoral commission is all hogwash.
It's not possible.
There's nobody in the country, even if you take a priest or a bishop and you give him a ballot paper, he goes into the booth there, he will vote for somebody. Therefore, everybody has got his preference.
Yes.
And therefore, they're saying that we need to involve the political parties in selection of members of the Electoral Commission. Like in their case, they had a commission of 17 members, 10 nominated by political parties, and 7 from the civil society. And the chairman comes from the civil society. But more importantly is that at the polling station itself, you've got 3 from the civil society, where the presiding officer comes from and his deputy. And then there are 4 from political parties. So these actually counter-check each other.
Yeah.
So to ensure that there's no monkey business at the polling station.
Now that you brought up the role of political parties, especially in the electoral process, it kind of jumps what I intended to go to. But do you think Kenya is ready for such a mechanism? I mean, especially in the past few weeks, we've seen a lot of infighting within political parties and amongst political parties. So with all the conflict going on between the political party mechanism, are they really in a position to play a fundamental role in what is a very important exercise for a nation?
Yes, you see, it really depends on the kind of democratic space that you allow the political parties to occupy.
Yes.
Like, as you know, we have the Political Parties Act, and which provide for political parties liaison committee, which is supposed to work together with the Electoral Commission to create an enabling environment for free and fair elections. That committee had not been set up. It is now that they are in the process of setting it up. But as you can see, there's still a lot of wrangling going on over its leadership. If that is sorted out, then that can actually help to work out proper structures which will ensure that the process itself is transparent and is inclusive. For example, the issue of voter registration is so crucial. You find that, and there's a lot of discrimination, that other areas are allowed to register more voters than other areas. So you find that other people are disenfranchised from registering as voters. Could you give us an example of those regions? You see, you find, take an example, in terms of population, going by the 2009 census, the most populous county is Nairobi. Number 2 is Kakamega. Number 3 is Bungoma. Number 4 is Kiambu. But you'll find that in terms of voter registration, Kiambu has registered almost the same number of voters as Kakamega and Bungoma combined. That cannot be right, which means that some other people have not been allowed to register as voters. So what we are saying is that the vote should count, and every Kenyan who has attained the age of registration as a voter need to be enfranchised to register as a voter. So what I get from you is that it's not a level playing field, that it has been made easier in some regions as opposed to others. Correct. Anyway, I want to go into matters referendum. I think that's the number one thing everybody wants to get your insights on. And interestingly, I was as I was looking at the development of this project, of this initiative, pardon me, you supported the Constitution when the first, when it came about, the advent of it, the current Constitution that we have. But in doing that, you said that there need to be changes made, that it is a good law on paper, but there are some things that need to be addressed. So one of the things I want to pick your mind on, with what the Okoa Kenya initiative is pushing right now, are these the issues that you initially had in mind when you were talking about the changes that were needed to be made, or did this just come along? Well, you see, when we were passing the Constitution 4 years ago, we all say that it was not perfect. Yes. That there were certain areas that needed to be improved on. But we say that, look, let us pass it first, and then we can look at those other areas in the future. There was a group of people who said, no, let us correct them first before we go for the referendum. Those are the people who are the no, the group, the red carders. Yeah. But in the end, we prevailed, and the people passed the Constitution. Now we are saying that the time is now, because having started the implementation in August of 2010, up to now, we now have realized areas where the shoe is pinching. But you see, it would have been better if it was a bipartisan approach. That's the reason why, when we started, we asked the other side for a dialogue. Yes. There's a dialogue so that we can actually have a bipartisan approach. All of us realized, by the way, that there are other issues. Yeah. But because it is not a bipartisan approach, the issues we cannot carry right now, because you need the other side to work together.
Of course.
So that's the reason why we have only identified 3 areas which needing immediate attention. This is the issue of devolution, the issue of inclusivity, land.
Yes.
And the 4th one is
electoral reforms.
Electoral reforms.
Yes.
There are others. For example, we saw recently Parliament try to bring cabinet secretaries to answer questions.
To the National Assembly.
Yeah, because they are frustrated that MPs are bringing questions concerning their constituents, but then they are being answered by fellow MPs.
Yes.
Because the executive is not in the House. Okay. Now, the executive presence in the House makes the executive more accountable.
Of course.
So that needs to be addressed. Maybe you can come up with a mixed system like in Ghana, where half of the cabinet are members of parliament,
yeah,
and half are technocrats. Okay?
Yes.
But that cannot be addressed now by us just going it solo.
Yes.
Okay?
Now, I like that you brought up the element of a bipartisan approach, where both sides of the administrative function of a country should be able to, sit down and come up to some sort of, agreement. I want to ask you, if the roles were changed, if you were the one as the president of Kenya, would this country still be going to a referendum?
Certainly, yes. And I would have introduced it. We would have actually invited the opposition to a round table, so that we could discuss and say, look, we all agree that there are certain gray areas which need to be addressed now because this system is not working properly. There's the issue of the sizes of the counties. For example, we have got 47 of them. Is this the right arrangement? Or could we, for example, reduce them like we did in Bomas, and we came out there between 14 and 18 counties? That is another issue that will need to be addressed maybe in the future.
Now that you've talked about, the construction of the counties, just off the top of my head, I'm just trying to get off what you're saying. If there were less, do you think there would be less, wrangles and conflicts with the devolved system of governance? That if we had less counties to deal with and less counties to fund, that it would be much easier to see the devolution process through?
You see, you'd have what you call the economies of scale. They would be larger, they would be fewer, the overhead costs would also be relatively lower,
yes,
than they are right now. So even administratively wise, it will be easier to administer than it is right now. You have to deal with 47 governors and speakers, the county assemblies, whereas if there are fewer, like 14 or 18, it will be easier. So revenue sharing also will be easier. And in terms of development, there are certain projects which cut across several counties. And this county has so many. You see, for example, you've got border issues between counties, and there are so many of those issues. There would be fewer kind of conflicts as far as the borders were concerned.
We'd have less to deal with. Now, I realize your time is up, so I have one last question. But will you be willing to take another 5 minutes?
Go ahead.
Thank you.
I can indulge you.
I like that. Now, the Constitution was a brilliant piece of law. I studied the law, and on paper, it really was brilliant. It came with very many great ideas, and I think the goodwill of it is indisputable. But here we have a constitution that we just brought in, and we gave it, give or take, 5-year implementation process just to see how it works. Now, one of the questions I have been receiving, especially from my viewers, is the necessity of a referendum, especially now. Is this something we need to do now, or can we wait the 5 years, sit down, collectively put all our issues together and see through one comprehensive referendum? Because we can tell that there are very many parties that are discontent with the way in which this constitution is operating. We have Kenya, we have the Council of Governors, but is this something we need to address now? And if so, why?
You see, it is not a question of when. The time is not the issue. The main issue is there a need for this? And the answer is yes. And I want to give you an example. The U.S. Constitution, which has been billed as one of the best constitutional documents.
Ideally.
Yeah. You know, it was amended within 6 months of its promulgation. The first amendment came. In fact, they're saying that as they were passing it, they already drafted some amendments. The same thing with the French Constitution.
Yeah.
Was also amended within the first 6 months. And a similar thing happened with the South African Constitution, after which we borrowed quite a lot of some clauses in our own Constitution. And the South African one, in its 20 years of life, has been amended now nearly 15 times. So it is not the issue of time, the issue of the need to do these amendments. For example, we now have 5 years in the life of this government. Yeah. And if we left the structure as it is, it will not work properly. And there's still a lot of wastage which we're having right now. So it is better to fix it now before it is very late. There are the issues like with devolution. We're not just talking about the resources being increased to go to the counties. We're also talking, for example, about security. You see, should the governors have some role in security? You can see, for example, they're fighting Turkana, Pokot, Baringo, Samburu, and so on. The governors are completely impotent, yet they're the ones who are there on the ground with the people. So you need to give them a role to play. In our proposal, we're saying that the governor should be the chairman of the county security committee, just like the DCs and the PCs used to chair them in the past.
Exactly. I want to ask that, I get why you're trying to push this initiative, and I think Kenya and together with CORD has been very categorical in the issues they want to address. It is not to say that these issues are not important, they are. Matters like inclusivity, even the ODM women group addressed it, talking about leave just even, you know, cultural inclusivity, let's also deal with gender inclusivity, you know. When we stipulate things, let's be able to follow through. And it is a noble initiative, it can be said, but at the same time there is the other side, and there are allegations that the push for a referendum is merely a way to distract the government from doing what they said they would do. And in respect to that, I want to ask you, what is your agenda? It goes without saying you're a very influential person in the political sphere and Kenya as a whole, but you are in the opposition. So is your agenda to see the government fail, or is it to hold the government to task in delivering what they said they would deliver to Kenyans, even if it's not in line with your own ideologies?
Well, you know, in a multi-party democracy, there are roles for the ruling party and the opposition. You see, the ruling party is there because they have the numerical strength in parliament to be able to push the agenda. Numerical strength. That goes without question. Yes. Even if you go to Britain, that's what it is. If you go to India, in Israel, and all over the world, they're always the ruling party and the opposition. So if you don't have enough numbers, then you form a coalition so that you get numbers. And that's why, for example, Jubilee went for the Amani coalition to boost their numbers, to get what they call the tyranny of numbers. They have just basically bought the opposition parties to increase their numbers. Otherwise, it would be a hung parliament,
yes,
as it were. Now, the opposition, on the other hand, has a role to keep the government under check,
yes,
to oversight the government. So it is not really the duty of the opposition to help the government to rule, to run the government. It is to be there not to distract. You should not distract the government or prevent government from doing its work. You should basically be there as a watchdog to check and ensure that the government, in doing its work, is actually abiding by the provisions of the Constitution and the law.
And have you done that?
That is exactly what you can see we are doing. When we see, for example, that there's wastage, money is being squandered, there is corruption in award of contracts, there is grabbing of land, for example, general abuse of power. The police are not doing their work, the insecurity is increasing in the country, and all this. So you all the time point those out to the government. And in doing so, we are not being destructive. It's called constructive criticism of the government by offering alternatives. So if you look at all my statements which I've issued, I always offer an alternative to the government. That's why before we even went for the issue of referendum, I came up and I said, let us dialogue.
Let us talk.
And let us talk. And I gave them 2 months when I was just saying dialogue. And they refused to accept the dialogue. That's why we went to this route of referendum on our own. So we are, of course, a very constructive opposition. We want the Jubilee not to waste the 5 years. If we just sat there, because a number of times I'm being told, why are you helping these people to run the government? Why are you pointing to them their mistakes and showing them how to do it? Why don't you just sit there
and let
them
fail,
mess up, and then you can capitalize on their mistakes after the term is over? I could as well just do that, because now some people see me as somebody who is making it difficult for the government to run a country. But that is not my intention. For example, I'm telling them there's a lot of wastage right now. You can see, for example, too much money is going into recurrent expenditure. There's too many trips being made by Parliament, by the MCAs. You can see that a number of countries are complaining that the trips by Kenyan legislatures are just too much. They cannot actually cope. They cannot host these Kenyans. And these people are just going on joyrides, shopping sprees.
On Kenyan taxpayers'
money. And the government is not seeing it. See, so there need to be a way in which these things can be dealt with. The government sometimes is afraid to deal with this on its own.
Exactly.
Because they fear there will be a backlash. But if there was a bipartisan approach,
yes,
then we can take a common stand and say we are going to correct this, we are going to put it right together. And I'm ready all the time. So that's why I've always extended the olive branch to the president.
You want to work together?
Yes.
Now, I'm glad that one of the things I really wanted to pick your mind on, especially because you've been a political pinnacle for a very long time, you know? Even from the advent of multi-party politics, you have been there. So I wanted to ask you about the land question in Kenya. One of the things that I was able to identify last week while we were on the show was that the land issue in Kenya is as a neglect, a failure of, you know, the post-independence regimes to deal with the misappropriation of land and why it was misappropriated. Now, you've been in government for a very, very long time. And I remember when you came back from your Mozambique, South Africa trip, and you addressed the press at Capitol Hill, one of the things that you said is that we need to stop politicizing this matter. You were talking about the current land grab. We need to stop politicizing it and prosecute instead. Let's focus more on action instead of sensationalizing it. So I want to know from you, how are we going to achieve that, especially when politicians happen to be in the heart of very contentious land scandals? You know, when will we be able to break that link? When can we have a land scandal that doesn't have a politician involved?
Well, you see, land has always been an emotive issue. Because, you know, land is a factor of production and wealth creation.
Of course.
In civilized society, they say that it should be made accessible to people who want to use it for purposes of wealth creation. That's why they say that government should never be in the business of selling land. Government should actually allocate land to people for purposes of development. But as you know, the land was at the core of the struggle for independence of this country. People went to war to get back their land which had been taken away by the colonialists. But immediately after independence, there was this major issue. The nationalist movement split purposely on the issue of land. That is the reason why there was a split. There were those who said we should not buy back our land from the British. The British took it by force, used it for all these years. They should just return it back to us. But then there are those who said we accept the terms the British were offering to buy back, and the British government was giving loan to the independent government to buy back land. So that is where the nationalist movement split. Bildad Kagia and Jaramogi were on one side. Kenyatta and his other group were on the other side. So the issue was basically ideological. And, but then, fast forward, the land has remained a contentious issue because there has never been a comprehensive land reform.
Yes. Until
we were at Bomas. When we were at Bomas, then we looked at all the historical injustices on land before independence and thereafter. And we came up with a structure which is in the Constitution to address these issues. And that is why we said we remove the land management from the government and put it under a National Land Commission.
Yes.
That the National Land Commission should administer the land on behalf of the national government and the county government. And we categorize land into three: public land, community land, and private land.
Yes.
Okay? But as it were, you see, so we then, the Ministry of Lands spent a lot of time developing the National Land Policy document, which was then debated in the cabinet and in parliament and approved. After that was approved, then now a new Land Act was, bill first was prepared, and again published and debated and also approved. It consolidated all the various statutes on land, the new Land Acts, which spelled out the role of the National Land Commission. It took time. It was never gazetted. The Grand Coalition government was divided over its implementation. As gazetted at the end, most people ask, why did Orengo do A, B, C, D? Orengo was not able to do many things because at that time the new law, the new constitution had come into operation, but the Act had not been gazetted. The Commission of Land was still in office. The National Land Commission had been formed, but had not been gazetted. They could not start working. So now the National Land Commission is there, but they came into operation more in this new government. But as you can see, there's a tug of war between the national government and the National Land Commission. Why? Because the national government want to claw back some of the gains which were made at Bomas in the new constitution and bring us back to the status quo ante, where the Minister of Lands with the Commission of Lands will be the ones and the presidency in charge of the land. And the real emotive issue right now is that there are several leases which were issued in the year 1915, and they were 99-year leases which are expiring this year. Yes. And they are due for renewal. And that is what the national government wants to be in charge of. They are also the ones, for example, in tea estate and coffee estates, which should now be part of the communal land under the county government. And these also are contentious issues.
So are you saying that the government is working against the spirit of the Constitution that that governs it?
Certainly, the government is working against the spirit and the letter of the Constitution. It's also undermining the provisions of the National Land Act with impunity. And that's the reason why we have actually chosen this, to reinforce the position of the National Land Commission in the Constitution, so that there's no ambiguity whatsoever as far as that is concerned.
In terms of interpretation.
Yeah.
Now, I also want to know, what is your take on the politicians who are implicated time and time again in land scandals?
You see, there are politicians who basically live by way of land grabbing. You find there's some people who left the university after graduating. They call themselves hustlers. They never worked anywhere until they became members of parliament. They had never seen a payslip. But in that period, you find that they were acquiring properties, owning electricity, residential homes, and huge tracts of land all over. You ask yourself, where did they get the money to buy those pieces of land? Nobody can tell you. So you have instant millionaires, who are people who have just enriched themselves through illegal acquisition of land. This is what needs to be prevented, what you call primitive accumulation of wealth. You know, you remember in the Wild West in the U.S.,
yeah.
in those days, these things were happening. It is a primitive stage of capitalist development.
A lack of civility.
Exactly. So that kind of greed is what we are witnessing. We are in that kind of phase in this country. And that's what we are saying, that should be stopped so that there is a proper organized development. And that people who require land for purposes of development, for purposes of wealth creation, are enabled to do so legally, so that you don't have a few greedy people enriching themselves at the sweat of the rest of the society.
Now, my last insight I'm seeking into matters land. What happened in Peketoni? We saw what transpired. It was an absolute tragedy. Nobody in the country was expecting something like that. I want to know, first and foremost, why did Lamu blow up the way that it did now? You know, no one even was aware or blatantly aware of the severity of the situation and on the ground. And also, in line with that, I want to know, what did it feel like when the government came out and blatantly said that this is not an act of terrorism, this is politically driven?
You see, what was most unfortunate was that the government was trying to divert the attention of the people from a very serious issue by simplifying it and saying, oh, this is a result of political incitement by political leadership in the country. And then failing to substantiate that very serious allegation because they only arrested the Lamu governor, trumped up charges which could not be sustained, was eventually discharged. You see, the Lamu issue is complex, and it dates back to immediately after independence,
yes,
the first republic, and then it went on through the second government of Moi, and it was not very much in the Grand Coalition government that I can vouch for. But so it is part of what you call historical injustices.
yes.
It even started before independence, you know, some of it. The coast land problem, as you know, the issues of absentee landlords, the Arabs who acquired land and then took off are still owners and so on. So it is an issue that needed now to be addressed by the National Land Commission. There has been quite a bit of tension there in the sense that there are indigenous population
Yes.
versus settler communities which came from up country, and that you find that other people are getting title deeds, others are not having title deeds. So it is an issue which should actually have been settled very well. I remember when we were trying to put up the port there was a lot of tension. And I told the president then that we should not go to do the groundbreaking of the port before we have dealt with this issue. So I went to Lamu and addressed the residents of Lamu and told them that the indigenous people with the right to titles will be given title deeds. And the Ministry of Lands actually prepared a number of title deeds which we went there and we distributed at that time. That is when the tension went down. And that is how we managed to bring the then Ethiopian Prime Minister, Meles Zenawi, and the President of South Sudan to Lamu for the ceremony of groundbreaking for the port. But now, back to this incident, which was very unfortunate. All the international intelligence groups, the CIA said it was Al-Shabaab. The British intelligence said it was Al-Shabaab. The French said it was Al-Shabaab. Al-Shabaab themselves owned up and said it was us. But now the government, the president is made to make a statement saying, no, it was not Al-Shabaab, it was a local thing.
Yes.
Nobody has ever been arrested. And then, but they even went further. The county commissioner of Mombasa, Mr. Marwa,
Yes.
went on to claim that this was actually ODM. And they went to attack some ODM supporters in Likoni. And 4 people were killed. A number of people were wounded in Likoni, supposedly as a revenge for what happened in Lamu. So, which is a very, very irresponsible act by this government. So we are saying that it is a regime that does not know whether it is going or it is coming. And the left hand does not know what the right hand is doing.
You're such a profound man. Now, as we finalize, because I realize that you have to leave, my last question for you is, you know, what can we expect from you next? You know, short-term, you know, goals and your long-term goals, especially with the aspirations of presidency. You know, is that something you still want to do? You know, what can we expect from Raila Odinga?
You see, I don't sleep and wake up thinking about presidency of Kenya. I will be having high blood pressure. But as you can see, I'm very healthy.
Quite.
Because I don't think about that. I said if the people want, yes. But I will not push myself to be the president of this country. Remember, over 10 years ago, I said, let's just put somebody else. And I stood up and said, Kibaki Tosha. And I led the campaign for Mwai Kibaki when he was injured at that time. So I want to see this country united. I want to kill the ghost of ethnicity in this country so that we can have one nation that is united. This devolution I'm talking about, we brought it so that we could actually deal with disparity that exists in our country.
Yes.
As now, as I'm talking to you, we have several countries in one. They are part of this country, which where you go to, you find very high development. Paved roads, water is nearby, electricity is there, state-of-the-art schools, and so on. But the other places, when you go to, they ask you, RAILA, how is Kenya, where you come from? Because they don't believe that they are part of Kenya. So that is what we want to deal with now. And right now, just within 1 year, those people are now very happy because they have tasted the fruit of devolution. If you go to Wajir, they are beginning to see what a tarmac looks like now for the first time. The same thing with Mandera. In Marsabit, you see, in 50 years, the national government drilled 20 boreholes in the whole county. Within 1 year, the county government has drilled 20 boreholes. See, Kisi Hospital was built in 1917. It never had a dialysis machine. Anybody in the county suffering from kidney had to be brought to Nairobi to queue to get a treatment. Within 1 year, the county government has already procured 2 dialysis machines. So Kisi patients don't have to be brought to Nairobi.
Yes.
So a devolution works.
It works.
It works. So what I'm trying to say, I'm more concerned by good governance and to ensure that Kenyans get what they rightly deserve. That is what actually concerns me on a daily basis. When I wake up in the morning, I want to see a better Kenya.
Thank you so much for coming on the show. I think it was great to have you clear some of the air. Now, you have heard it from the man himself. He's not interested with the politicking and all the scandals and the noise. He wants a better Kenya. He came here, he set the record straight, and he has said that devolution is working. As we are doing good, there are also some things that need to be addressed, and it is not a matter of time and when it is necessary. Provided it needs to be addressed, it should be addressed. Many thanks for joining us tonight on Just the Facts, where the brilliant minds meet. I'm KAMENE GORO. Up until next time, do have yourself one lovely, blessed night. Thank you so much.
Thank you.